Hello, everybody, and good morning. This is Ed Rocha, the founder of the Morning Goals and your coach. Happy Thursday. I hope you guys are all doing well. For those of you who haven't seen me for a few weeks, we've been on vacation. It's summertime, but that's okay. I am back and looking forward to being with you all today. So over the last few weeks, we have been working on discussing turning negatives into positives. We've talked a little bit about negative feelings. We've talked about looking into our past and looking at ourselves and making things better for ourselves by looking into ourselves, turning negatives into positives. And if you're like me, who's a little hot-headed, sometimes reactionary, this can be difficult for some of you, and I am very aware of it. I like to tell this story that I used to be so angry that the energy that I would exude out into the world, people knew that I was angry. People knew that and felt this negative energy inside, even as I walked into my office or in my building. And I was like, whoa, what is this that I'm exuding to the world? It's not positivity. It's a lot of negative energy, and that's not who I want to be. And I actually worked on myself a lot through therapy and yoga and meditation, different techniques. I talked about positive intelligence a few weeks ago and really worked on myself. And people will say that, hey, you are a positive person. You exude positivity. So today we're going to talk about open communication. And this is something that is difficult for a lot of us. And it is something that kills relationships, hurts business opportunities. And I'm going to start with a quote today. And the quote is, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And this is from George Bernard Shaw. So the illusion that it takes place. So when we talk about open communication, I used to do this in my relationship. So I am married. I've been with my partner for 12 years. And what I used to do in the past is I used to have these massive blow-ups, these very angry, rage-like blow-ups. And don't get me wrong, that still happens from time to time. But I used to come at my partner with a list of everything that had ever happened that I had never told him about. You yelled at me for the dishwasher. You didn't walk the dogs. You told me this and you told me that, or you said this. And the list would be like 12 things completely unrelated to the trigger that had made me angry in that current situation. Imagine that, right? So I'm angry, let's say because of money. There's a money situation. We forgot to pay the bills and the electricity gets turned off, as an example. And I'm yelling at him, not because of that situation or discussing that situation of paying the bills on time. It is the dogs, the dishwasher, the car payment, helping around the house, something he told me in front of people that embarrassed me. Nothing to do with the situation. And for about 4 or 5 years of our relationship, I used to bring a laundry list to the fight. That's what I would say. I would bring a laundry list to the fight. Now, what would happen? So instead of resolving the problem that was at hand, whatever that might be, in my example, it was the electricity bill or paying a bill, it created a whole different level, complex situation that was completely unnecessary, that lasted on for days, if not weeks, and maybe even sometimes months. And then we're creating a level of insecurity, a sense of fear, because the other person now is like saying, whoa, what's happening? This Ed has a laundry list of all the things. He's keeping track of everything. And what I realized through working on myself, it was actually a lack of communication on my part. So when something happened, I had to learn to say, hey, this is not a surprise. This is how I feel. I need you to know that right now. And then we can move on, or we can deal with that situation. So it took me actually a few years to understand, when I came to the fight, talk about one thing. nothing in the past. We talk about being in the present, but that communicating, that feeling in the moment was very important for me to get it off my chest and to not harbor it inside. And for some people, that is extremely difficult to do, to talk about one thing, one feeling right now. But for the person receiving the information, sometimes all we can process or should process is that one piece of information. So in open communication, it's being precise. It's saying exactly how you feel right now, be present, and not get into an argument. I caught myself saying was effective was I had a situation with my partner. We got into a little argument, and he said, well, I didn't say that. And I said, this is how you made me feel, right? Because sometimes how you feel versus what they say are two different things. And if you're not communicating that feeling, then they can't improve or cannot help, right? So in this open communication, we're labeling and talking about one thing at a time when we come to the fight. And it shouldn't be a fight, it should be a discussion. And two, we're sharing our feelings so that they understand how they're making you feel, right? Versus you said this, okay, you said that, so what? Come back to the feeling and let them know. Open communication as well. And again, I started the session by saying the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So when I use the example of me coming with a laundry list to the discussion about the bills, I hadn't been communicating those things. My partner had absolutely no idea whatsoever that these things were happening or occurring, and how can he fix them if he doesn't know about them? How can he help us as in our relationship if it's taken me 6 months to tell him the 12 things that have been bothering me in my head and in my heart and in my emotions? So I took some of that responsibility, or had some of that responsibility, because I was not communicating how I was feeling or how he was making me feel, right? So while we think we're communicating, while we think they understand what we're going through, they actually may not. And it's our responsibility, because we're in charge of ourselves, to share that with them. That is open communication. One of the other things that comes up in coaching, I'm a business coach. So I work with founders and people who are starting companies, etc. And I worked as a consultant. I did business development. I even did communications training to Chinese graduate students and students who were coming to the United States. And what I always see and hear and talk about, especially in a business setting, is your vision. So a few weeks ago, when we did our self-reflection challenge, if you participated with us, if not, you can go find it on YouTube or on our website. I had you guys work on your big picture. So your big picture is what you want your life to be. It may be words or a mantra. It may be a mission statement, but it's a clear sentence, phrase, paragraph for you to go by. Now, that's communication. You're putting it out to the world, what you want, what you need, how you're going to do it, etc. In business, we do the same thing. Now, the number one problem in business is that open communication generally is the weakness of a boss or a founder. So they think they're communicating their mission or vision, but they're not. When I do consulting, the number one problem when I work with a life science company or a startup education company is that the boss has not relayed the information down to the people below them, and there's been a lost in translation. And this can happen in our relationships as well. You think you're communicating, you're sharing information, but in reality, it gets lost in translation, and the person doesn't know what you actually mean by it, what you actually want by it. I'm going to give you guys a silly example. So when I started my education business, Rolla Languages, I was the boss. I was here all the time. communicating with people, I was working with people, I was training people, etc. So my job was to tell them exactly what I wanted them to do, how I wanted them to do it, and give them feedback. And feedback should not be scary. If somebody messes up, constructive criticism, not their fault. It's actually your fault. If that person messes up, it's your fault. And I remember a situation where my assistant had lost $5,000, whether it was an accounting error, whether the money never came in, but $5,000 was on paper missing. And she came up to me and she started crying. And I remember telling her, is there any way to get it back? And she's like, well, I'm not sure. I've done everything possible. And it's either an accounting error or the money never came in and we logged it in. And this might have happened a month ago, 6 months ago, etc. And I remember telling her, look, I, at the time, was traveling to China. I had hired her as an English and Spanish teacher, not as an accountant. And I took responsibility for that loss. And I said, hey, look, I hired you to do something that I knew you were not qualified for. So the responsibility is on me. So sometimes in this example, it falls back on us to communicate what's happening, what happened, take ownership of these things, right? So in this very concrete example, which is not a communication thing, it's more of an action. I took responsibility because that's not her. It wasn't her role. So when we talk about roles in this dance of communication, understanding everybody's role is important. Okay, so in our personal life, understanding how someone is making you feel, how someone is speaking to you or at you, and then how you're receiving that information. Very important. And in business, being very clear and concise, offering a space of cohesion and community where that criticism is a learning experience and not a punishment or a critique that is negative, that's important for the business side of things. So remember, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So sometimes it does not take place. You think it has taken places. And so I was actually recently in a situation where I was talking to a company and I said, look, if I do this for you, there should never be any surprises. Think about that. In a relationship where there's communication, everybody knows where everybody stands, their roles, their feelings. There's no surprises because I've already labeled things for you. I've already shared things for you. There shouldn't be a surprise. You should know how I feel. Now, if there's a level of lack of communication, you might be scared when you have to have a serious discussion. You might be fearful of criticism you might receive from the other person, right? Or there might be a level of paranoia in a business situation. They're talking behind my back. There should never be any surprises. If I'm going to get fired, I should have known on month 5, 6, 7, 8 in year 2 that I was doing a bad job. And if I didn't know that I was doing a bad job, guess whose fault it was? Not mine. The bosses and the leaders, and it's their lack of communication, their lack of sharing of information. And that is a real, real big problem. So things that I want to talk a little bit about next is definitely how we can open up that communication. Here's another quote. The biggest communication problem is we do not listen to understand. We listen to reply. The biggest communication problem is we do not listen to understand. We listen to reply, and that's from quotediary.me. We listen to reply. What I said earlier about the reactionaryism or being reactionary is part of our problem, right? Somebody says something, you respond. Somebody says something, you respond. And in reality, it might be okay to process, listen, take a breath, take a step back. So 2 parts of this: the listener in open communication and the speaker in open communication. So the listener and active listening is a powerful tool. So when there is an open communication, the person who's listening and receiving the information is vital to that. And that might be you. Okay. So listen attentively. Have open body languages. Don't sit there like this, right? Because that's a sign of defensiveness. So you're going to have open communication. You're going to listen attentively, and you're going to have a posture that is open and receptive of what they're saying. Don't interrupt. This is something that I personally had to work on a lot, was not interrupting. Just listen and sit there, even if it is so uncomfortable. Even if they're not communicating correctly, don't interrupt. Just listen. Accept silence. In my quote, we listen to, but after you receive this information as a listener, pause for a moment, take a break, walk away, process the information before you react. Because sometimes when we react, we're not actually thinking, we're just replying. It's an automatic thing. Now, on the other side, when you are the speaker, we talk about speaking with purpose. Okay, so in my first example of my laundry list of things with my partner but the one trigger was the bills, it wasn't paid. When I brought in the laundry list of 12 different things, I was not speaking with purpose. I was speaking to win, I was speaking to debate and argue, and I was speaking to hurt. Speaking with purpose. Why am I mentioning all of these things? Well, that's lost because I'm throwing dishes and bills and money all at the same time. Now, if I just spoke about the bills, the speaking with purpose is, hey, we have a problem on our hands, we need a solution, and then we need to discuss how this should not happen again and what is our plan. Number two is use I statements. So when I have a problem, you have a problem. No, it's my problem, right? And so instead of saying you did this, you did that, you got this wrong, okay? I would recommend that you use I statements. I feel that this didn't go like I had planned. Let's figure out how I can help or what I saw, right? So in the example of the bills, I should have helped you with this, and I could have reminded you, how can I help with the situation? How can I take over? Or maybe you're too busy. What can I do to help me? Right? Not you did this, you forgot this, this always happens, you always do this. That's sometimes hard, right? Because you're in a communication, there's a two-way thing, thing happening here between two people, and it's hard. Start with I statements. And then the other thing is, as you're speaking to someone, sometimes you start yelling and getting angry, and we start talking at them. Okay, we start talking at them. Take a breath, right? If you start yelling and screaming and raising your voice, which is very natural for someone like me or somebody else out there, taking a breath may help you gather your thoughts, choose your words better, and the listener might become more receptive because you've controlled yourself in what you say and how you say it. So instead of being hurtful, you're communicating. So I have a couple of questions here. You are saying that we should openly express our emotions in business and personal relationships that lean on an open communication style. Sometimes it can be hard to know exactly how we are feeling and communicate those feelings appropriately. Do you have any suggestions to help myself and others understand our emotions before presenting them to others? Yes. Breathe, pause, and think. Breathe, pause, and think. So sometimes, and I say this often, there's generally not an emotion. An emergency. There's generally not an emergency. So let's say I tell you to do something because I'm your boss and you feel uncomfortable with that. Say, okay, can I just have a moment? Pause, walk away, think about it. Or you can even say, can I get back to you? That buys you some time to think about it. So again, don't be reactionary. That's our go-to. Our go-to is to be reactionary. what we're doing when we're active listeners to help our communication, and we're great communicators because we're sharing how we're feeling as things are going by. We are actually preparing ourselves to label what's happening. And I'll give you an example. I think I'm a pretty good boss. And so everybody who works for me will get a call, and I will always ask them every single week, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Is everything okay? Do you feel supported? Okay, and I do it in different ways. But if you look back at my text messages, and I know some of my employees are watching this right now, I always, at least once a week, give them the opportunity and the space to tell me how they're feeling. Now, if they're not sharing that, then maybe it's my lack of communication, or it's their lack of communication. But I always try to give everybody an opportunity to share with me, to say, hey, I need to take a break or take a step back. And I'm pretty good at that. So there should be no surprises. If my employees are looking for jobs, I tell everybody that where we're at today is I want this to be a stepping stone for something greater. Now, of course, I don't want them to leave me, but I would rather them tell me and communicate with me so there's no surprises, number one. But two, I want to help them. I want to help elevate them to the next job or to the next level. I want to be their reference. So in those situations, it's also being able to communicate and create an environment that is safe and open. And as the boss, making sure that I'm listening when I need to listen to. I'm not interrupting, and sometimes I do interrupt, and I apologize for it. I might keep going, but I acknowledge this is what I'm doing. I accept silence and I listen. I make sure that my vision is translated, and if it's not, it's my fault. We're working on a project for a new program, and I been traveling and on vacation, so the vision was not translated appropriately. Not their fault. I told them to do something, but I didn't give them direction or my fault, right? Because I didn't translate that vision appropriately. I'm going to speak with purpose. I'm going to use I statements. I'm going to take a breath, and I'm not going to blame people. And then most importantly, I'm going to always ask, how are you feeling? How's it going? Are you overwhelmed? What can I do to help? Because there should never be any surprises. So as we go on to the real world today on this wonderful Thursday, it is hot across this country. Then make sure that we're trying to actively communicate. We're trying to not be reactionary. And I'm going to leave you with this quote from Paulo Freire. Only through communication can human life hold meaning. Only through communication can human life hold meaning. So communicate this week with everybody, with your partners, at work and your colleagues. Label how you feel and share that feeling with people when you feel comfortable. And with that, go visit me at themorninggoals.com. We are super excited. We're doing some really fun stuff. And I will be back regularly throughout the summer at 9:30 on Thursdays. With that, have a blessed Thursday.